All right guys, now we're all done with the welding part. I'm gonna get the grinder out, but I'm just gonna clean it up and then hit it with some paint. What's up guys, my name is Andy. In this video, I'm gonna be installing the torque boxes on my 66 Mustang. This is something that has been on my list for a very long time, and I just never got around to do it. I kept putting it off. I made excuses of not getting it done. To be honest, part of it is because there has to be quite a bit that you need to take off to get these done, to get them installed. I mean, at least it's easier that way. And so I just been waiting till I had a point to where I was gonna take off, in this case, the fenders, so I can get to the spot where you need to weld these on place. So what I've got is the right and left torque block box. And then I've also got these little gusset pieces that go, they go in the corner at the bottom, and actually, I think this is the driver's side, and so this would sit, I don't know, something like that. Anyways, we'll figure it out when we get in there. But anyways, we need to get this installed. So to do this, the first thing we need to do is we need to get the car up on jack stands. We got to pull the fenders off. You really should pull the carpet back in the car. To do that, you're going to have to pull the door sills off and the kick panels inside there. You may find it easier to also remove the seats, but I think we can get away without having to remove the seats. Take the fender off. To do that, you got to take the headlight buckets out and the grill off. And I just got done installing this hood and this bumper and stuff, this lower valance on the front of my car. So a lot of the parts are already off my car. I left them off on purpose because I knew I was going to be getting to this. So for you guys, if you're going to be tackling this, it's just easier just to take all this stuff off to get to where you're going to need to weld. And then once we get it up on jack's hands, we got to get the wheels off there and kind of free up that area inside there so we can get these installed. So let me do that real quick. Let me get everything taken apart and up on jack stands, and then we'll jump right into installing these. So now I got the car all taken apart, and I probably should clarify, you don't need to take the fenders off to do these torque boxes. It's a lot easier, particularly if you're on the ground with jack stands and stuff like that. But the higher you can get the car off the ground, the less you'll need to have the fenders out of your way. If you have a car lift, you can get the car high enough that you can work up above, and it would be much easier to install these with a car lift, but I don't have that. So taking off the fenders is the best option. I know a lot of you guys, when you take your fenders off, it changes the alignment with respect to the hood and the bumper and the headlight buckets, all that kind of stuff. I get it, I'm with you, but that was one of the reasons why I put these torque boxes kind of lower on my list, waiting till I had to take this stuff apart because I knew I was gonna take it apart to do these torque boxes. So if you guys have this in the future, maybe you save the torque boxes for then. But anyways, so we got the car taken apart, and this is where the real work begins. We need to prep this area underneath here, and I am blessed with either the previous owner or somebody before him putting an undercoating on here that's it's a rubberized undercoating, so it's going to take some extra work to get that off. I gotta have a wire brush wheel to take that stuff off. And you don't have to clean up the whole area, just the areas where you're gonna weld. Well, that's something that, you're better off just cleaning the whole area up, then you can just paint it later when you're done. But I need to get this cleaned up, and then I need to get the two halves of the torque box prepped and ready to go. What I've done here, like I mentioned before, I got the one-piece unit, and so if you guys are if you've got you're doing a restoration to the point where you've got the firewall off, then a one-piece becomes, handy because you can sandwich it underneath where the frame rail and the firewall, the bottom of the floor pan here, will meet, and this would be in between those pieces. But because I don't have that set up, and because I'm not, in that position, I have to actually trim quite a bit of this off to get it to fit because of where it would go if the car was taken apart. So if you guys are in a position to get the two-piece, like this, where they're separated, it'll just save you some steps, save you some work from separating these. You got to drill the spot welds out and get everything cleaned up, ready to go. From here, whether you have to do that first, or, you take them apart, or you've got them already apart, this is where we want to start getting this piece modified and trimmed so that it fits inside here. You're going to notice this flange along, so this is the passenger side one. This flange here, you're probably going to have to hammer it down just a little bit, so it's more of a 90-degree fit. This seems to be a little bit more, mine was a little more open than I would like it. And we need to cut inside the bottom of the firewall here for this flange to fit up inside the car. So I'll go over that here in a second. So you got to do that. And then also there's a piece that we're going to have to trim this kind of somewhere, probably like something like that. Trim that off to clear the flanges down there. That's okay, that's not gonna hurt anything. That's not gonna, you know, take away from the integrity of this part. We're gonna weld it all in place. Losing that piece of sheet metal there isn't gonna hurt anything. And get everything prepped. We might have to trim a corner here or bend something there. And every car, I mean, these cars are 60 years old now. They've all kind of moved around and tweaked a little bit. So, and then these parts are not perfect from the factory. So it's okay if you have to bend a tab or cut a piece, cut a corner. You're not gonna hurt anything. So we gotta get ready for installing. So that's one of the things we gotta do. And then I did wanna point out, if you did buy the one piece, what I did here is, on this bottom piece here, I actually drilled out the spot welds, but I didn't drill holes in here. And then this is the piece that mates with it. I did drill out the spot weld so there's a hole there so that it will get to fit right. How'd that go? There we go, this one right here. So this is how they're gonna mate up. That way I can plug weld along here and weld it to this. This doesn't weld to anything, this is hanging out in space. And you'll see that when you get into the part. But that's just something that it's gonna make it easier for me to plug weld to that. But this tab here, I'm gonna have to weld that to the bottom of the car. So I did leave some holes there and then some more holes so I can plug weld that. Drilled some holes along here because this flange is going to weld underneath the frame on the bottom side. So I wanted to do some of that. Then I'll also, you know, do some stitch welding along the seam of this, but I wanted to do some plug welds there. Same thing with this flange. This flange right here is going to mate with this. And again, this sounds a little confusing right now, but once you get the part in your hand and you'll see how it fits, it'll make a lot more sense. Drilled a couple of holes because we're going to tack them there. And then this part here, this last piece on the top, this part's gonna sit in there like so. So I wanted to plug weld this to the bottom of the firewall, and then this will mate up with it, and I'll just plug weld that to this piece. So anyways, real quick, let me show you what's going on in here and what we have to cut on the car. All right, so again, here's looking at there's the door for the passenger side. What we're gonna need to cut a slot that runs the length of this corner in here. And the easiest way is to maybe drill just a big hole here, big enough to get a Sawzall blade in there if you needed to do that, and then drill a hole at the bottom here, and just run a Sawzall blade all the way down this corner here. But that's okay, don't worry, you're gonna weld that up, so it's not gonna hurt anything. If you've got like a cutoff wheel or something like that, you could just use that just to cut a hole in here. The slot just needs to be large enough for this edge, because this piece is going to sit, it's kind of hard to show it. This piece is going to sit inside here, and that flange is going to sit up inside the car, and then we'll weld it once it gets in place. Right here, this is the part I was telling you about. If it's a one piece, this edge right here would fit in between the firewall and this lip on the frame, but we can't do that. I can't separate this right now, so I'm just going to cut around this on here, and that's going to be roughly kind of something like, well, that's too big, something more like that. I'll cut that out, and then it'll fit around this flange on here. And you might find you have to trim a little bit of the corner up here to get everything to fit, and you might have to hammer that flange just in a little bit more, that kind of stuff, just to make it fit your car. And that's just going to take some time. You'll notice that, let's see here, if you can tell, there's a seam right here that kind of matches up with this. That's about the top of where this is going to mate up. So you can kind of get an idea of where this is going to fit, and it'll go all the way down to the bottom here, this bottom edge. So there's a lot of space in here that we're going to cover up with this, and we're going to use some like some tapping screws to hold this in place. Once we get everything trimmed and fit, we'll self-trap screws into here just to get it to hold in place, and we'll start welding around it and get it locked in. And then you'll want to go from there to the second piece, and the same thing, You might have to hammer the edge down a little bit and trim a corner or something like that. There's less trimming on this piece. It's mostly just trimming this out right here just to fit around that guy there. So now I already did the driver's side, and that's, well, let's go take a look at that real quick. This is about as close as we're gonna get because my welds are bad, and I'm just gonna save you the hassle of giving me a hard time. My welds are bad. But this piece is welded in there. You can see that gusset there in the corner, and we'll go over that here at the end. That piece goes in there, just again helps triangulate, strengthen up this corner, and everything's in place and good to go, painted, everything's happy. So my next step is to go ahead and get everything all ground up and cleaned up inside underneath here, and then I do some trimming on this piece and just start to fit this thing in here. And then we'll start welding in place. This video is not a how-to for welding instruction. I am not your guy on how to do that, and I can weld, but I'm not a welder. So I won't be really given much instruction on that. And we'll keep the camera far enough away so you can't see how bad my welds are. Anyways, all right, well, let's get started and get to work. So you guys saw me do a lot of prep work. I grounded down the areas where we're gonna weld. This is gonna be for the second piece, not the first piece, but we grounded down here, around this trim piece here that, you know, this has been cut out. Again, I cut this thing out, I cut some more off the edge here, and actually I notched this out on the bottom, which normally you wouldn't do, but I've got the power wire from the battery that runs up to the front of the car running along here, so I needed to clearance that. And then I had to bend the tab in a little bit so that it'll fit inside the slot that we ground on the bottom of the floor pan here. I drilled some holes that I'm gonna go on the other side and plug weld, which would be to the back side of this. And then I've got some self-trapping screws that we're just gonna drive in just to suck this piece to the firewall while we get it in here. So first thing, and you know, this is a lot of a cut and fit and then cut a little bit more and trim a little bit more. And we drive this guy in here. Already fits pretty good. I'm gonna have to drive that in a little bit more down there on the bottom, but we're already fitting good, so let's get the hammer and drive this in a little bit more. These sheet metal screws, they're into the sheet metal of the firewall, but it's so flimsy that it's just making the metal of the firewall just bend as I push on it. So it's okay, we're gonna push on it and then tack it in place and work our way around. These screws are just to kind of help suck everything down and hold it in place while we start to weld everything in. All right guys, this is my least favorite part, just because I'm not a good welder, so that's why I got the camera so far back so you can't see how bad my welds are. Okay, so we've got this piece installed. I've got a lot of the welds ground down up on the top here because that second piece is gonna sit flush on top of here, so I need to grind that smooth. And then make sure the side's cleaned up, down the side here and across the bottom here. We gotta make sure that's all cleaned up. Again, clean steel makes a big difference with your welds. And then this piece right here, you might have to tap the bottom of this a little bit, kind of straighten it out or bend it a little bit just to get it to fit right. But everything's all done with this piece. Now it's time to start fitting in that second piece and put it over the top of this. All right. Now everything's ground down off of that weld. Everything's done on the bottom. All I've left to do is this gusset piece, and I went ahead and marked on here about where it's gonna be because I wanna grind that clean, and then you gotta grind underneath the frame rail here clean. Also notice that the frame rail bends right here, but this piece doesn't bend. So it's easy if you just tack one spot and then hit a hammer and kind of form this gusset piece around the bend of the frame rail. Probably the easiest way to do it. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up and get it tacked into place. All right guys, now we're all done with the welding part. I'm gonna get the grinder out and clean some of this stuff up, and then I'm gonna hit it with some black paint, some Rust-Oleum stuff, just to get this prepped, because again, I'm gonna take the car to get the car painted, but just to protect this metal. I got the primer already on here. I put that on before I put the part on the car, but I'm just gonna clean it up and then hit it with some paint. All right guys, so that wraps this up. I've got everything painted and done and ready to go. I can go ahead and start putting the car back together. I just wanted to cover real quick, again, when you're doing this, I got about 8 hours into both sides. I'd say more than half was on the first side, just because you're trying to figure out what you need to clean off, where pieces are gonna fit, how much you have to trim before you put it in there. You trim a little bit more, put it in, doesn't fit, take it out, trim it, that kind of stuff. And on the second one, I knew a lot more of what I was gonna have to do. Trimmed a lot of it off right at the beginning, and it pretty much fit on the first try. So that's something that's just gonna happen when you're doing multiple parts like this. So, but this part, it's installed, and the welds are, I probably have more welds than I need to make up for my lack of welding, but it's in there, it's installed, it's secure, everything's in place, and now I need to put the carpet back and that kind of stuff, and continue to get this car ready for paint, because I got a couple more things I need to do. But when you guys get to this part, if you've got the welder I have, it's not a fantastic welder, but it does the job, more so on the lack of my skill. If you guys even had something like one of those flux core wire feed kind of things, you could probably still do it with that. If not, taking it to somebody to weld these in might be the best option for some of you guys. This is something that I'm looking forward to improving the handling of this car. Unfortunately, it's winter time right now, and I'm not gonna be driving the car because I'm taking everything apart, getting it painted. But come springtime, I'm anxious to get out and see, you know, what this car feels like with these new pieces in place. So that's gonna be something that's gonna be a big improvement on this car as I continue to dial this car in and do more and more suspension stuff. This car's handling better and better all the time, and this is just gonna be another box to check for making the car, you know, nice and tight and feel good when we're driving around. So. But anyways, you guys can do this. This is something that, you know, cut and fit and weld it in place, and then make sure you get some of that primer on that steel so that you're protecting it. Because once you get it installed here, you can't get on the inside, right? So you got to make sure you get it coated and covered inside there before you weld everything up, and then pretty straightforward after that. So, all right, guys, that takes care of that. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, and if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out. And we'll see you in the next one.